Welcome to the Contrarians, and tonight our topic, our top 5 concept albums. So we've got a pretty big panel. We're ready to do this. Let's get started. Here we go. Welcome to the Contrarians, and tonight we have a great topic. Our topic tonight, we're going to pick our 5 favorite concept albums. So this, I don't know if we've actually ever done anything like this, but we are doing it tonight. We have a wonderful panel. As you can see, we have Philip, we have Bill, we've got Dan and Derek. This is Derek's first show. So welcome, Derek. Nice to see you here tonight. Glad to have you. We always love new blood so we can, get a different perspective. And really, this is great. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. Been watching you guys on YouTube for a long time. So it's going to be a great discussion.
It's going to be fun. All right. So we're going to go 2, 2, and 1, and we're just going to go and let's do it. Let's start out with Philip. Philip, nice to see you. Let's
nice to see you too, guys. Thanks for having me over once again.
Of course.
Great to be in your company. So first of all, I have to say that actually this episode is a bit of a companion to one we did quite some time ago, a few months ago, which was with Martin, and Todd Evans was here as well, and it was about, is every concept album prog?
Oh, yeah, that was a fun one.
Yeah, and we mentioned everything from your most usual suspects from the prog area to even Beyonce doing a concept album, and is that prog or whatever? One of Martin's crazy ideas. Anyway, okay, so we have 5. We're gonna do 2, 2, and 1. Okay.
Yeah.
So my first one here, I'm not going in order of preference. I just have 5 records in front of me here, and I'm gonna go with one which came out just 2 years ago, and which really just for me it was maybe my favorite album of 2022. Best prog album of that year, and maybe, I don't know, if we look ahead, in the future, we might be talking about one of the greatest prog albums in history, besides those next to those of the 70s. And I'm talking about Marillion, An Hour Before It's Dark. So that's their latest album. Who would have expected that Marillion would release at this point in time in 2022 honestly, one of their best albums, one of the best albums of the Hogarth era. And okay, focusing on the concept. This one is a rather loose concept. It's not like they're telling a story exactly, or like there are characters. It's not that kind of concept. It's a generally sort of loose topic. This is an album that came just on the cusp. Just at the point where we're coming out of confinement, pandemic, COVID, all of that. And for me, this is the best album that illustrates and talks about the pandemic and confinement. There were quite a few albums and bands that tried to talk about the whole experience. British prog band Big Train had a tune about that. Neil Morse, of course, with Transatlantic, had a song where it was like saying, oh, we're all coming out of our holes or something now, back into the light or whatever. Even the Canadian band Anvil had a song about being locked up and in lockdown, and we are all locked down or whatever. This album resonates with a very strong sense of bleakness and at the same time hope. And the album is partly about many of the issues facing the world at the time and still today. It talks a lot about consumerism and about Brexit and the state of England and of the English people after Brexit. But it does talk a lot about COVID quite directly. It really, the whole experience has really affected the band. It's quite clear. They have a song here called Murder Machines, where it says, tested positive, no antibodies, no vaccine, no escape. At the same time, it does inspire a sense of hope. And the last song, a 15-minute epic, is simply called Care. And it's like a hymn to the National Health Service of England, which is in a lot of trouble. and to the people who were caring, to all the staff, to all the doctors, nurses, etc., who were caring for people at the time. There's even a picture here of a nurse in a face mask. And, there are lyrics like, the angels in this world are not in the walls of churches. The heroes in this world are not in the Hall of Fame. I saw a man paint a woman on a wall, mask on her face, screen over her eyes, hospital clothing, worried and exhausted, a thing of beauty. The angels in this world are not in the walls of churches, not rendered in bronze or stone. The heroes in this world are the ones who are working while we're all sleeping. So, Marillion, An Hour Before It's Dark, an album basically about the state of the world and very much about COVID, confinement, and what it meant to go through that experience. Brilliant album. Absolutely love it. And since I started with prog, I'll continue with prog. I'll go back in time to 1974 and, of course, to Genesis, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Not my favorite Genesis album, considered by many as the greatest prog album of all time, next to, yes, Close to the Edge. For me, it is, kind of indicative of where the band was at the time, and with Peter Gabriel's like insane, expansive kind of creativity that was just going to so many directions and which was pointing the way towards his solo career that would follow. But I really like this album for the concept, especially because it appeals to my love for magical realism and surrealism. You guys did recently a cover show on surrealism and surrealist covers. And what's interesting about this album, maybe even that famous Hypnosis cover, is that it's not surrealist, but it's magical realism. So it harks back to the literature of like these Latin American writers like Gabriel Garcia Marquez or Borges, who basically created this kind of image of a world and of a reality that is enchanted and full of symbolic references to religion, to death, to sex, to various strange things. And basically, this is just the story of a Puerto Rican immigrant called Rael, R-A-E-L, who finds himself in New York, in Broadway, and he goes on this really crazy, weird journey through New York, but a New York that is totally like menacing, enchanted, very strange, almost supernatural. And this is the famous Genesis album, which, stands out for not having that kind of Englishness about it, because they had been to New York and to the US touring before this album. And Peter Gabriel was like enamored with the US and New York, and he wanted to make a concept that is based in that region and which is much more urban, not this kind of pastoral English thing that they would often do before. And yeah, I really like this concept because it's very cinematic. Like I can picture a film, surrealist, magical realism kind of film that just like takes you on this weird journey where at the end you find yourself just looking in the mirror. That's what happens in this story. He looks in the mirror and he sees a reflection of himself somewhere. It's very strange, very bizarre, but I absolutely love Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, especially for mostly actually for the concept, because the album is just like has too many songs for me.
All right, cool. Excellent. Two great choices. Holy crap, we're on fire already. All right, thanks, Philip. All right, Bill Schuster, let's hear it.
Right. Thank you, Grant.
You got it.
Nice picks, Philip. Yeah, Lamb's not one of my favorite Genesis albums either, but it is still a classic.
Some people think that's the best. I don't.
All right, I'm going to go completely away from prog. I'm going to go back to the 1950s here. Yeah.
Look at you. You never know what Bill's gonna. You just never know what you're gonna pull out of the hat, Bill.
Let's say this topic originally, when we signed up for it, was subtitled basically any genre. So I took that seriously. Yeah. So I could easily pick out classic prog albums back here. There's a ton of them. I could do 5 Roger Waters, Pink Floyd related albums right off the top of my head, and I'd be good. But I wanted to get a little bit weird with it. So I'm going with somebody who was very limited early in his career when he got to start recording in the 20s to 3-minute singles because of the recording technology of the time. But his imagination was always big. He started with, Reminiscing in Tempo in the 30s. It was essentially a 12-minute 4-part song put across multiple singles based on the technology again. But finally, once the long-playing record came along in the 50s, Duke Ellington was able to expand upon his imagination and go for some wild ideas. And this is one of them. A Drum is a Woman. This is a very over-the-top, fun, ridiculous, but musically brilliant album. This is Duke just having fun telling the story of Caribbean Joe and his drum, who turns into a woman magically and known as Madame Zaj. Yes, Zajj, more or less jazz spelled backwards. Very clever there, Duke. Duke was always known for his music, not so much for his lyrics.
They didn't call him the Duke for nothing.
That's right. But yeah, the story is so over the top and ridiculous. But again, as I said, it's a fun ride and the music is great. His orchestra is at the top of their game here. To me, this is like the band he had in this mid to late 50s era was peak Ellington orchestra for me. And it's absolutely brilliant. The only criticism I might have, it is a bit of the times with the very idea of this drum is a woman, and there's this line in there that's sung at one point, something about beating on a drum, and there was implied violence against women. Mm-hmm. And it was the times. I'm not at all excusing it or anything. It's a little cringy at that moment, but I tend to look past that and move along and get into the fun parts. And yeah, he had a whole lot more concept themed albums all the way up to 1974 when he died. But this is one of my favorites. It's a whole lot of fun. So if you've never heard it, it's a fun ride. I absolutely recommend it.
Awesome. Cool.
Great. My second choice is much later. This is 2010, 2011. This vaguely relates to the Marillion pick in that Marillion was famous for crowdsourcing some of their albums. But a few years later, one of the two artists involved in this project became, I believe, the first person to gain over $1 million crowdsourcing on Patreon. And that was Amanda Palmer. So while Marillion pioneered, Amanda took it to the next level. And she did a weird little album in the midst of her solo albums after the breakup of Dresden Dolls, her former band. She partnered up with a guy named Jason Webley. And they recorded an album called Evelyn. Now, the idea here is that Evelyn are a pair of conjoined twins. And they were actually played in concert performances by Amanda and Jason together in costume. One of them would play, use one hand to play the neck of the guitar, and the other one would do the other part, which was pretty impressive in itself and just an interesting visual. But this whole album is like this creepy, gothic, almost horror story, but it has a lot of humor to it as well. You can see on the back here, one of the other characters, when the girls are basically captives of a circus for a while, they run across Kimba and Simba, also known as Elephant, who are conjoined twin elephants. And yeah, there's murder, there's revenge, there's the way that Amanda and Jason combine their voices on this is very convincing. They become one character at one point in the way that some people might imagine that conjoined twins sharing body parts essentially might also share thoughts and feelings. And it's a really weird album, but I absolutely love it. If you know anything about Amanda Palmer at all, she's always been a little off the wall and all over the map, and that's what I love about her. But this might be one of the weirdest things she's ever done, though. unfortunately, it's a one-off. I'd love to see a sequel, but it kind of ends on the note that it needs to. The only cover on the album is the final song, and it is a cover of Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Love Will Tear Us Apart.
Too.
That is pretty wild. Okay. Never heard of that.
Most people probably haven't.
I've not heard of the Duke Ellington one either. Of course, I've heard of Duke Ellington, but not that particular offering. So, all right. Excellent. Good. Super. All right, Dan. Okay. I don't know if you can talk Duke Ellington. And
I feel like such an amateur now going after Bill here. Like,
jeez. Man, should have let Bill go last. My goodness.
All right. I put mine in order of preference. So my least favorite of the 5. Picture a 11-year-old in 1983. Yeah. This album is a concept album, but it's not very well loved. But being 11-year-old, I probably would have had 5 albums to my name at the time, and is the first album I bought with my own money. So I'm going to go with Styx Kilroy Was Here. It is my favorite of the Styx, but it permitted me to go backwards and get the rest of the catalog, by the way. But there's a special place for me for this album here. It's nobody apparently likes Mr. Roboto, but to me this brings back memories of, because this was we moved from my original town when I was 12 to the town I am now, and this song, Mr. Roboto, was like the thing back in our class. And it was like, to me, when I hear the song, it's like, it's sad moments because, I'm leaving my friends behind and I'm moving on to, but I've listened to this album like so many times, and I've talked to people. I'm like, yeah, this is my favorite Styx album. They're like, really? Like, I think it's their worst and blah, blah. I'm like, well, sorry. Like I grew up with this album, and there's some silly songs with heavy metal poisoning, of course. There did not age very well, but I don't know, the whole album just gives me shivers, and in a good way there. So yeah, I'm gonna put Styx Kilroy Was Here, and they finally played Mr. Roboto live for the first time, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It took him that long to go and play it live there. So for me, number 5 will be Styx Kilroy Was Here. Yeah. And my 4th pick, I'm cheating a little bit because I'm going to put a 2-part. So it's 2 albums that came, 30 years apart, but there's part 1 and part 2. So I'm going to go with Alice Cooper, Welcome to My Nightmare, and Welcome to My Nightmare. I've heard this so many times that right now this is kind of my favorite, but nobody seems to like this one here. What I do like about these 2 albums is the different musical genres. You got like heavy metal, you've got some folks, whatever that type of music that is there, you know what I mean there? Mm-hmm. The Turtles type of music there from this one. It's full. I find it's fresh. I never grow tired of hearing both here, but yeah, for me, I'm just and the last song, the Underture, where he does an instrumental of songs from this album and this album and puts them together. I'm like, wow, talk about a fun way to combine these 2 albums and make like it's like it would be a song that you would play during end credits of a movie or something like that there. It's got every hint of songs played differently than these 2 versions there, but yeah, I'm gonna go with Alice Cooper, Welcome to My Nightmare, and Welcome to My Nightmare as my 4th choice. And I don't know why not many people like this one. Maybe it's a copy, or I don't find it a copy. I find it a very good continuation, and very original. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, didn't Bob Ezrin produced that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd never
Baby
heard it.
Once with Kesha as the devil is just a hoot. That's a lot of fun.
It's fun. I don't take it seriously. It's fun. But him rapping with the blood, what's that?
Some kind of bloodbath boogie.
Yeah, disco bloodbath boogie fever. And Ghouls Gone Wild is my favorite song of the album. Like, he's like, okay, you got the term girls gone wild. Let's make it Ghouls Gone Wild. He just came up with the titles. Let's make a song out of that. And that's the one with like the Turtles-ish there. Mm-hmm. I think there's people from the Turtles on that album.
Oh, Flo and Eddie might be on there, probably.
Yeah, those two, yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Super. All right. Man, picks that I never would have thought would even pop up. This is wonderful. All right, Derek, like I said, welcome to the show. Take it away. Give us two of your picks.
All right. Well, again, thank you guys for having me on. I had to pick an album in case before anyone else picked it, because I know it's a popular one. I know Bill likes this album a lot, seeing him on Rush fans, but I had to go with Clockwork Angels, their very last album from 2012. This album combines everything that Rush had done up to that point. A little bit of prog, there's some heaviness, a little bit of synth, orchestra. I love the clothing of the Garden and Caravan and the whole story of the protagonist. And the fact that they wrote an album that you can listen to the songs either separately or all together, it's just really brilliant to me. Just every little piece fits together so perfectly. Even the B2B2, which some people say doesn't really go by itself, it's a cool little atmospheric piece. And the fact that the guys were able to write this kind of music upward into their late 50s is just incredible. And other bands could only dream of making an album this classic. And the cover is really good too.
Yeah.
Great way to end a career, too.
Derek, can you say something to, like, what is exactly the story of I've never really understood what was behind the concept of Clockwork Angels.
So the way I see it is the protagonist's name is Owen Hardy. He lives in this sort of farm town, and he's expected to be a farmhand and just live his life on that sort of farm. But he aspires to do bigger things. Sort of like the story of Hemispheres, Circumstances, kind of the way Neil wrote lyrics. And he goes on this journey, and you have songs on here like the title track where he goes to the city and sees all the Clockwork Angels. He goes the Anarchists. You have Seven Cities of Gold, the Wreckers. He kind of goes on this journey. It's almost like a more mature version of the Fountain of Lamneth. Like Neil really took that theme and kind of honed it in with a more mature mind. Headlong Flight. I really love that long proggy epic. And I wish them well. Yeah, I love that one. And then ending with the Garden, just kind of sort of retiring and just living your life and reflecting on what you've done in your life, which I think is interesting. If you read Getty's book, which I have over there, he said that when he went to go visit Neil on one of the last days that he was alive, he had said that Neil listened to every album of the discography while he was sitting at home. And he said he was proud of everything the band had accomplished. So I thought that was a nice summation of the band and Neil as a drummer, lyricist, and as a person.
Yeah, that's really, really moving. Yeah.
No doubt.
All right, for my second one.
Excellent pick. All right, super.
Yes, I had to go with that one first. It's much my favorite band.
You go.
He's wearing the colors, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, sir. But for my second pick, I don't own this one physically. I had American Idiot by Green Day. Going a little bit more modern here. I'm going to do some crazy picks later on, but I'm kind of trickling it down. But I love this record. I discovered this band back in 2009. A quick little synopsis. My mother and I had moved from another apartment. I had to sleep on the floor on a mattress, and I had this tube TV. And all we had was 28 or so channels. This is when analog TV was around. And they had VH1 classic videos. I turned the TV on. I see a video for 21 Guns by Green Day. I'm like, oh, I like this. So I ended up just going to the store, Rite Aid, all these little stores that sold CDs, just bought a bunch of Green Day albums. That Rite Aid had American Idiot on CD, brand new sealed for like $10. I just came home, I listened to it. I love the concept of this Jesus Suburbia character or St. Jimmy who has to survive in this more modern world of the media talking at you and the influence that drugs can have on you and just mental health and depression. And the fact that this album was written in 2004, it's still very pertinent today with the title track. I love the suites of Jesus of Suburbia and Homecoming that sort of almost bookend the album. Jimmy meets a girl named What's Her Name, who is detailed in she's a rebel. She eventually leaves him. He has to go do a 9-to-5 job in Homecoming. And then over time, he seems to recollect all these memories of this girl. And the album ends with What's Her Name, a very beautiful and haunting sort of looking back on what could have been. And just the fact it's a punk album, it's so heavy, it's ferocious, does not pull any punches. If you look at the lyrics for the song itself, it does not pull any punches. And it's still something that gets you in the gut to this very day. And it's one of those albums you can just listen to from front to back or listen to the singles. You got Holiday, Wake Me Up When September Ends, a song that Billy Joel wrote about his father passing when he was, I think, 10 or 11. And he ran into his room and said, "Wake me up when September ends," because he was that distraught about his father passing. And you have stuff like Letter Bomb, which is down and heavy, very caustic of the times that we were living in 2004 with the war in Iraq and George Bush being reelected. Just when you listen to an album like that, you can feel the passion behind it. I know a lot of people like to clown on Green Day, saying they're more of like a Who ripoff, or they're kind of doing the Pete Townshend thing. But I think they sort of take that and they kind of mold it into their own. I do hear a lot of John Lennon songwriting in Billy Joe's sort of songwriting himself, going back to the early albums like Dookie and Zomniac. And as they went on in their career, they were able to build upon that. And as they left the boundaries of sort of regular pop, punk rock behind, and they were able to do their own thing and really combine that into this amazing rock opera kind of record. And it's something that really only they could do to a certain point, until MCR would come back later on, a couple of years later, and do The Black Prey, which is something similar to that, which I didn't pick that, but that was close on my list.
All right. Green Day, ladies and gentlemen. And you said that came out in 2004?
Yes, sir. It's actually 20th anniversary edition coming out.
Oh, my God. Okay, well, do I feel old? Okay, all right. Because time flies, ladies and gentlemen, and I didn't realize it came out in 2004.
I know.
Because I bought it when it came out. Oh, boy.
Only 28 channels made me feel old. I'm thinking I remember having like 1 or 2 channels.
That's what I was going to say.
When I was a kid, we had
4 or 5 channels.
We had cable, but we only had 13 channels. But we had cable. We could see it at least, so that was good. So
it's either VH1, modern, like town, like community television, which had like polka, like old folks dancing to polka music, or the news. That was what I had to choose from. So I get VH1. It was.
Well, I always was, when I was a kid, I was hoping, when MTV came out, I was hoping, oh my God, I hope we get that. I hope we get that. We never got it.
Yeah, it was on the pay channels for us here in Canada.
Was it? I used to have to go to my cousin's house in Worthington, Ohio to see it because they had Cube and we could watch it there. Oh my God, I'm 1,000 years old. All right, cool. Thanks, Derek. 2 good choices. You're making me feel old. Okay, let's throw it over to Philip for his next 2.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Amazing diversity for now. I didn't anticipate seeing someone like Duke Ellington. I mean, I grew up listening to Duke Ellington because my mother was into jazz, but I never knew that the guy actually made some kind of like concept album that is just out of this world. Speaking of feeling old and of 2004, at the moment, Mastodon are touring to celebrate the 20 years from the release of Leviathan, basically their breakthrough album, the album that really put them on the map. And it's 20 years since its release. It came out when I was a sophomore student. I was in my 2nd or 3rd year as a student. So 20 years ago. You more or less know my age right now. And the amazing thing about Leviathan, so okay, I've spoken about albums that have like a sort of general theme behind them, or a kind of like really crazy meandering story, and both have in common the fact that the performance of the singer especially is really like bringing to life the characters and the themes. And here we're talking about a different kind of concept album where they are basically doing an adaptation of Moby Dick, So we're talking about taking a really famous piece of literature and turning it into something appropriate for a CD, right? And basically in an album that's roughly 45 to 50 minutes, these guys have managed to like really capture the essence, I think, of Moby Dick. Not just in the lyrics and the song titles like Sea Beast, I Am Ahab, Island, Naked Bird, Aqua Dementia, etc., but more like the music itself. Their first album was all about like Earth. They did the four elements. So the first one was about yes, Earth. Then they did, or was it fire? Anyway, I think the first one was Earth, and then they decided to go with water. So they went for Moby Dick, and the music itself, the chords, the various changes through the tunes, they are really evocative of a certain feeling of like being stranded at open sea and of battling some kind of like, biblical beast stranded at sea. It's I cannot really describe it. You have to listen to it to really perceive that kind of sensation and how they managed to just create this crazy musical amalgamation of like Metallica, Rush, and the sort of New Orleans sludge scene, and to make something that's really, really eerie, strange, aggressive, but melodic, technical, prog. Anyway, Leviathan is an amazing album. At first, when it came out, I didn't like it. I bought it simply because it was really hyped. And I didn't like it in the beginning, and I regretted it. And after a while, it grew on me, and then I realized that these guys are geniuses, right? That's how it often happens. So this is an amazing album, and the concept is just incredible how they managed to adapt Moby Dick. And then I'm going to go for something else, which I've spoken a couple of times before on the show. Rather predictable because I talk a lot about prog, so I'm not going for jazz or punk rock. Although I should have explored other genres as well. But I'm going to go for the kind of concept album that's a prog rock opera or just a rock opera. Not The Who. I'm not going to go for something predictable, but I'm going to go for these guys here that I'm really, really fond of. I don't know if you could see it, Arian by the Dutch songwriter, composer, producer, a man of music in general, Arjen Anthony Lucassen. It's a one-man band, and he gets a different lineup for every album. And he's like a textbook geek, sci-fi geek, comic book geek, music geek, cinema geek, everything. And basically, he has created here a concept that is like a whole saga that runs through many of his records about some kind of alien race who are performing some kind of crazy experiment on a group of people who find themselves in some kind of dream world in space. And you have a character like the Highlander, the Indian, the Knight, the Roman, the Egyptian, the Barbarian, the Future Man. You even have a voiceover that is narrating sort of where the characters find themselves and what their next mission is and stuff like that. It's very operatic. You have a very large cast of performers, including Fish from Marillion, right? Anneke van Giersbergen, the famous Dutch singer. Damian Wilson as well, who's an incredible vocalist. And yeah, it's basically an opera with a really geeky concept that is reminiscent of like Doctor Who and that kind of culture of like 70s, 80s, or 60s even sci-fi, very playful, very silly, tongue-in-cheek. And yeah, he writes himself here that it's actually a space opera. So that's my number 4.
All right, cool. Excellent.
Very nice.
Man, this is awesome. All right, Bill, let's hear it.
Well, this was one that I was considering, but now that you've already done, I won't use the Dream Sequencer as one of my picks. So,
yeah.
And I forgot to mention that this one is Into the Electric Castle, right? So this one actually came before the one you're showing.
But both excellent albums. So, yeah. All right, I'm going to tease this one a little by also showing one that I considered, but I'm not picking. Joe's Garage, Acts 1, 2, and 3. I love this album, but it would be too easy for me. So I'm trying to go for a little bit more of a weird one, but I am sticking with Zappa. It's the last album that released in his lifetime. Civilization Phase 3.
Oh, nice.
This is not exactly one of those that you're going to hear, well, pretty much anywhere. A lot of people really hated the things that Zappa did in the 80s and the early 90s before he died, using the synclavier, the instrumental stuff with that. I think in a way he had the same problem Duke Ellington did. He was constrained by technology based on when he lived. If he was around today, I could only imagine what he would do with the technology that's available. Oh. He would probably never use a live musician for anything. That's just the kind of guy he was. But despite the comparatively primitive technology here, the synclavier, and this does have some live band stuff thrown in on the second disc. It is a 2-disc album. The general concept here is that there are people living in a large piano. Yes, it's a ridiculous concept, but again, it's Zappa. It started with voice samples going all the way back to 1967, with various people in the Mothers of Invention circle, random people that Zappa interviewed at the time, and some of that came out on Zappa and the Mothers albums in the late 60s. But he used a lot of those recordings from 67 on and combined it with 1991 new vocal recordings with new people, including his daughter Moon, among others, and put it all together and made this ridiculous story of the people living in the piano, somehow creating this patchwork out of all these samples. And in between each of these vocal bits is an instrumental synclavier piece, which, if you like Zappa as a composer and you don't mind the sound of synclavier, they're as brilliant as anything else he ever did. In fact, that I would say better. I think he improved as a composer and he went on in life. The concept, honestly, is kind of secondary here, but it's just kind of cool because it's so very ridiculously over the top Zappa. It's just, that's, again, who he was. And yeah, it's nothing to take too seriously, but yeah, it's a cool one to just sit back in a dark room and enjoy and just float away into whatever weirdness. Imagine what it would be like to live in a large piano. All right, this next one is not quite as off the wall, probably. This is a band that hasn't released an album since 2011, unfortunately. They've been talking about it for years. I'm still waiting. This was their second album, came out in 2001. It's El Cielo, let me take that out, by Dredg. D-R-E-D-G is how you spell Dredg.
Okay.
They're essentially a modern art rock, art pop, hard rock, prog, a little bit of this, that, and everything band. The concept here was inspired by a Salvador Dali painting. And apparently Salvador Dali's wife had a form of sleep paralysis. And so the songs on this album, the lyrics are all about various aspects of what that might be like to suffer from sleep paralysis, to essentially be almost living dead in a sense. And it's just an absolutely gorgeous album, though. I mean, there are rock elements in it, but there are also just gorgeous little instrumental connecting bits. Dredg, they are very undeservedly obscure. Their follow-up album, Catch Without Arms, in 2005, got them a bit of minor commercial success. Bug Eyes was apparently, the single was played on MTV quite a bit, but I think as Catch Without Arms is my favorite, but this is probably their masterpiece, though. It's a very moving album. Yeah, I don't ever see it getting played on rock radio stations, but there are lots of hooks along with all the not so hooky parts, all the connecting bits. So if you need hooks to hang on to, there are enough here to keep your interest. So yeah, come back, Dredg. I miss you. It's been 13 years. Let's go, boys.
I don't know.
All right.
Who knows? Excellent. Cool. All right. Thanks, Bill. All right. Dan, you're up.
All right. Next up, for my third favorite, I was reading a magazine. It was either Metal Edge, Circus, or Hit Parader, and there was top 10 songs of all, and I know it's of all time because there was Led Zeppelin in this, and one of the songs on this was "I Don't Believe in Love" by Queensryche was on that. I was like, okay, this has got to be good. So I went and bought it just because of that. Now the concept is a little complicated. My friend told me about it the other day, and I've already forgotten about it. But this album, just from A to Z, I mean, it's I don't personally think they've never done anything as good as this. This just works. I forget, like I said, the whole concept, but the songs are so good on this. This was one of my favorite albums. Now, don't get part 2. There is a part 2. See, I didn't cheat with this one because the part 2, I am not that big a fan, even if Dio's on it. But yeah, this one here is just, and they played it live, the whole thing, I believe, back then. And I think Jeff Tate now does it solo.
Yeah. He actually has a band called Operation Mindcrime.
Yeah, that was the deal. That was the deal when they broke up there, that his band was called Operation Mindcrime, right?
Something like that they're called now. And they're basically performing this and other hits like Empire and...
Exactly,
Yeah, early stuff.
But yeah, this one here, just like from A to Z, just I love this album. Great hard rock metal, or they call it here in Canada, smart metal. There you go.
And actually, Jeff Tate had to go through therapy to sort of deal with him really transforming into that character that he is sort of impersonating. It was a bit like method acting, all these actors who become their characters, and after that, it's like, you feel like you need to distance yourself from that other version of who you were for a while.
Like Alice Cooper did back in the he couldn't separate from the stage guy and the But yeah, that was all him pretty much, like, that came up with this concept with Jeff Tate there. So anyway, Operation Mindcrime Part 1 would be my third choice. Now, second one is, I'll show it right now there, Iron Maiden, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. It took me a while to get into this album. When I first heard it, I wasn't crazy, not because of keyboards and all that, it just didn't hit it. But then I started listening to it over and over. I'm like, wow. So this, apparently there's I don't know if it's a tale or what do you want to call it there, where the seventh son, born of a seventh son, would have some sort of powers. Pretty much it tells you at the beginning of the song Seventh Son there. He has the power to heal. He has the gift of the chosen one, blah, blah, blah. But this concept album came by accident, sort of, because, they went off on their own directions and decided to start writing songs. And, I wrote a song about this. Well, this kind of matches with what I'm trying to write right now. And, how about we make a concept album? It was... The wheels were starting to fall at this here in Canada. I'm not sure about other parts of the country there, but it was kind of going like this. But this is sort of considered the last good Iron Maiden album. But yeah, I just love. I mean, if you compare it to their early stuff, it sounds a little wimpy, but it just works. So for me, Iron Maiden, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, my number 2. I just love this. The idea, the more you listen to it, I find the more you're just discovering, because it's such a vague concept here. But anyway, there you go. Iron Maiden, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, my number 2 pick right there.
I think the seventh son is actually the devil or something like that.
Really?
Something akin to the devil, Satan, religion. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've never bothered to read the whole mythologic. You know what I'm talking.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is there, but the big myth behind that story there. I was like, already with having a seventh son, and then that seventh son has to have seven sons. I'm like, my God, the chances of that happening are very minimal. Let me put it that way. You're like, you get a daughter in between, you're like, you just ruined it. Anyway, there you go.
All right. Excellent. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Derek, give us your next two.
All right. So this one's going to be a bit of a curveball for you guys. I don't know if you've ever heard of The Weeknd before or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going with his 2020 album, After Hours, speaking of the pandemic. The Weeknd's known for his sort of attitude of being alone and just not really being able to find a relationship, at least one that really means a lot. And he's written about this before on other albums, Beauty Behind the Madness, Starboy. He's had big hits here and there. One of the biggest artists. Blinding Lights is on this album, and that goes way deep into the track list. But this album is that whole spiel, that whole subject taken into a concept album form. So he starts off beginning Alone Again. You go down the track listing, you have a song called Heartless, which is this kind of hip-hop, modern hip-hop kind of beat. You have really modern production on it, very trap hip-hop inspired. That's basically the first half. Then the second half, you find out after Heartless, he's been partying so much, trying to forget the woman that he lost. He passes out. You hear the ambulance, and that's where Faithless and Blinding Lights come into play. And now it's up to interpretation whether or not the whole rest of the album is him dreaming or if he actually lives out the rest of the album. But you have songs in here like the title track, which is this kind of long, brooding epic with the beat that is builds and builds and builds. And just the way the Weeknd's able to transition from that modern era to a song like Blinding Lights, which is more 80s inspired, which is something he'd been building up to on Starboy and a little bit of the EP that came out before this album. But you could tell it's a pandemic album. He was in the studio, really writing it out, getting the parts solved. And some of the songs in the beginning do start out kind of light with that sort of trap and hip hop production. But when you get to like Hard to Love and especially Heartless, this is probably my favorite track on here. I just love the beat on that. And I don't remember who produces it, but there is a shout out by them on that. It's very powerful and just like, yeah, I don't need anyone. I can live on my own. I can, have affairs with whoever I want to, all that stuff. Just great catchy song. I wish it was longer. If you guys are like into any kind of modern hip hop or anything like that, but just the way the album ends on a more solemn note, where he's just kind of like, I'm bleeding out. This is the end of my life. Either he died in the hospital, in the ambulance, or he had died at the end through a suicide. It's up to interpretation, but it's just the way the album sort of fizzles out, sort of the way it began. It's just incredible. And there's good storytelling on here with Snow Child, and just the way the album flows. I just really like it. And it's one of those albums I discovered about a year or two ago. I was big into The Weeknd around 2015 when his Beauty Behind the Madness came out and he really became a superstar. Kind of fell out of the whole hip hop rap thing. Was starting to listen to more classic rock, and that's when I got into Rush and all the other stuff from 2018. But then, my brain, I sometimes don't want to listen to that stuff. I want to float on, listen to other things. So I went back and listened to some hip hop, and I that and another album that I'm going to discuss at the end, actually, are albums I really discovered and really got into that I think show that modern music isn't just all garbage. Or there's actually some great albums that come out in this day and age. So that's my number 3 pick.
Awesome.
As for my number 4, I'm going to go talk about what Bill was talking about with Pink Floyd. And we're going to go with Animals. This album, I think, is kind of underrated in their whole quadruple sort of album run. I love Dark Side of the Moon. I love The Wall, although the last side to me is a little bit superfluous. And I love Wish You Were Here. It's a close second. But Animals, I gravitated towards that because it's sort of dark and heavy. And I love the theme of the dogs that are just the common businessmen. And then you have the sheep and you have the pigs that are sort of modeled after this Animal Farm sort of motif from George Orwell. And I love how the concept was written about that. And I feel like this is Roger Waters really coming to his own and the building blocks to The Wall. But just starting off with Pigs in the Wing, Volume 1 and 2, how that bookends, I love albums that have a bookending kind of theme to them. And the 8-track version that has Snowy White's guitar solo is just incredible. I wish that was on streaming services so we could hear the full thing. But Dogs is great. I think it's 18 minutes. And then you have the elongated guitar solo from David Gilmour, one of his best, detailing the businessman lifestyle. And if you grow old, alone, you'll just sit there and die down south. That's just so powerful. It gets me every time I hear that line. And then the guitar solo, the lead builds up again, and you have the dogs barking. That really sets the mood. And Richard Wright isn't really on this album as much because this was when Roger was kind of pushing him out. He was going through some things and he wasn't really writing as much. But what he does contribute to this record, especially on Dogs and Cheap, is just incredible. He's really setting the mood here. And that's what I love about Richard Wright and his keyboard playing. It really sets the tone with the backdrop of Dave. And the fact the album flows so well at the end of the Sheeps overtaking the Dogs for dominance. And the fact that the album ends with Pigs on the Wing, which is a sort of love song to Roger Waters' wife, saying that throughout everything that's going on in the world, we always have each other. So it's like the beginning of the journey. This love is like a shield going through the journey of life and the dogs and the pigs and all of that. And then through the end, you end with that same love. And I think having that bookend was just a perfect way to end the album. And the cover, too. The Battersea Power Station with, I think, what was it, Angus, or I don't remember the pig's name, but they had that floating there, and they went out of control, and they had to shoot it down, and that whole story. Just overall a great album. And I also like the remix they did back in 2018 that released a couple years ago, too. Just overall a great album. It's sort of underrated in that quadruple run of Floyd albums.
Yeah. Man, yeah, that album is so iconic. It's underrated at the same time. It's a shame. I mean, just with Dogs, just for Dogs, like that album for me is like at the top, definitely.
Now I really want a version of Pink Floyd album based on Animal House with John Belushi smashing Roger's favorite act.
Too many animals.
Yes, very good. Great pick.
Great pick. Okay. All right. Philip.
All right. For my last one, I have literally in front of me right now a bunch of albums that are like all these mostly prog, not only but mostly prog concept albums. But I'm just gonna go with the one here that is very personal to me, and it comes from maybe my favorite modern contemporary. I don't know if they're a metal band or not. They've played a lot of metal, but then they've dabbled in other things. I'm talking about the Norwegian prog, let's just say they're prog band Leprous. The name of the band would make you maybe think of something really dark and brutal, but they're very far from being anything really extreme. So let me see. So this is their album. This is their sixth album. It's called Pitfalls. It was released in 2019. And what's very special about this album? Well, two things make it very special. One, musically, it was quite a departure from their earlier stuff that was kind of more dark and heavy with like 7-string, even 8-string guitars. And suddenly you hear a lot of influences from the main composer, singer, frontman, Einar Solberg. You hear a lot of influences from Massive Attack, ambient music, trip hop, a lot of soundtrack kind of style. And he uses all of this kind of mix in a very, very successful. He's very effective at combining all these different styles, like really dark kind of metal, but then also with all the stuff I just mentioned, to talk about his struggles with depression and anxiety. And I say it's personal to me because I've been through my own share of difficulties, like so many of us have been, especially during the pandemic and everything. And so basically, he's sort of talking throughout all these 11 songs about his struggles with panic attacks and depression. and it's a pretty dark album. The artwork is like all just really gray, and the titles of the songs are like, the first one, Below, which is one of their biggest hits right now, talks about like, all of my stories are below, beneath the surface, cannot grow. Curled and naked, I defer to shaky thoughts, all in a blur. Tunes like I Lose Hope, but it's not like some kind of overtly emotional emo kind of thing. It's very deep and heartfelt and like a personal confession about what it's like to go through a panic attack, for instance. Like he says here, quieting on the song Observe the Train, quieting the inner voice. Do not reject, but keep on breathing. Observe the train, then see it leaving. Breathe in, breathe out, release, let it all out. The simplicity of being here, as though he's talking about like literally trying to breathe during a panic attack and then going through this sort of mindfulness of like, feeling your presence in that moment. It's amazing just how he really expresses himself and the performances. I mean, this guy, his vocal range is insane. His performance is unique, and I think that if you're going to talk about a musical artist who talks about some kind of personal emotional struggle, this guy really sets the bar in how to perform that in a musical way that is honest and heartfelt and very musical, not just let's say melodramatic. So that's my last choice. And I have about 200 albums for honorable mentions, but we'll see.
Yeah, we're already at an hour, so
Okay.
All right, Bill, you're up.
All right. Just to give a little shout to Derek's one of his previous picks. I almost chose To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar as one of mine. So yeah, I'm there with you on the weekend things. But I went for something a little more traditional for my last one. It's not an old school classic or anything. Came out in 2003. It relates to Ayreon again. The Ayreon album that I showed earlier featured this guy, Eric Norlander. Ooh. This is Music Machine. It's a double album. Again, it's another one that's not necessarily to be taken so serious. It's loaded with all kinds of rock and roll cliches. There are some bits of commentary on the general music industry, because Eric is one of these guys that's always kind of been on the periphery. He's played with a ton of famous people, a ton of famous musicians have been on his various albums and projects, but he's never quite gone over the top and become a household name. So I could see how he might have a bit of, say, bitterness at the whole industry. But this is just a fun, all-over-the-map album. It features people, excuse me, such as Donald Buck Darmaroser from Blue Oyster Cult, Virgil Donati, Vinny Appice, let's see here, Greg Bissonette, Tony Franklin, Kelly Keeling, Scott Cale, Mark Bowles, and people in this general realm here, this modern prog, hard rock, metal, basic vibe. You're going to recognize a lot of the names on here. And yeah, this is essentially all over the map stylistically. It has prog, art rock, it has metal, straight up hard rock, it has a complete bank of keyboards. It has keyboard-based instrumentals and synth, piano, various organs, mellotron strings, you name it. The basic idea is there's a boardroom somewhere with a bunch of shady figures, anonymous people who decide to create a music machine. An individual they name Johnny America, and they plan out his whole life, and they make everything just right, where he's going to be just edgy enough to be cool and successful, but just sheltered enough to be safe, so they can commercialize and market him and make lots of money over his entire career. And they have a big plan at the end to kill Johnny off, because as everyone knows, rock stars sell better after they're dead. Do they succeed in killing Johnny? Tune in to find out, folks. I'm not going to spoil what happens at the end. So if you want to know, you're going to have to buy Music Machine by Eric Norlander and enjoy this wild roller coaster ride over 2 discs here. It's not reinventing the wheel at all, but it's absolutely taking you on a wonderful ride of everywhere the wheel's been before, basically in the world of rock and prog and metal. So, yeah, really anything by Eric Norlander I'm a big fan of, but this is my favorite of his solo albums. Highly recommended.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Bill.
You named a whole bunch of people that I like too there, so I'll have to go look into that one. Sorry, Grant, I cut you off there.
No, we're all good. You're up. You have the stage.
All right. So this, my favorite album. Again, is it just me, or the concept albums usually are a flop commercially, but with critics they're this one was a flop. 1991. It is my favorite concept album of all time and my favorite album of this band. I'm going to go with Savatage Streets, and I like it so much I went and got the narrated version. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this one here. Don't bother with this one, the narrated version. It just slows it down, if you ask me there. There's literally, if you're familiar with this one here, in between the first song and Jesus Saves, there's him, the guy, Jesus, they're talking to him with, like, he's a bum and he's going to tell a story and all that. Well, that happens in between each song on this one, as opposed to the original version that came out in 1991, which just has a narration in between song 1 and 2. This one just slows it down, in my opinion. But this is the story of a drug dealer becoming a rock star, going through a whole bunch of adventures. I like music, like the themes, or the stories, to me are secondary. I know this is a concept album. I know the story vaguely, but it's, I don't know, the style just goes from metal to ballads to what would become Trans-Siberian Orchestra, like orchestrated type of metal there, that what they were known for. But this is the type of album that you have to listen to from A to Z. You can't really go and pick a few songs here and there. Sure, you can go pick one song, but it's just, I don't know, I just find the whole thing just flows like a great story. And like I said, it would become what would become metal with an orchestra, and then becomes the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, which they now do a song off of this album called Believe. I've seen it live with Trans-Siberian Orchestra. They now do that. But I don't know, I just find the mood very creepy, but I don't know, but the end, the last song, Believe, just again brings me shivers or almost a tear, but I say almost. I don't know, I just find this album brilliant, but this one just flopped. They were like going like this, and then maybe it was the 1991, we all know what happened in the early 90s with these types of bands there. But to me, whatever it is, this is a great album. Not many people would say it's their favorite. For me, it's my favorite of Savatage.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
What's that?
Me too as well, yeah.
Great.
For sure.
All right, we're two. All right. Again, you have to listen to this from A to Z there. Do you have the narrated version also?
No, just that one, just the original.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I would say stick with this one. I mean, if you're a big collector, fine, go with the narrated, but it just slows it down with a sketch in between each song there. But it's, a drug dealer becoming a rock star and going through a whole bunch of other stuff there. Again, I just love the music for this here. So number 1 for me, Streets by Savatage.
All right, cool. Excellent. Derek, it's up to you.
All right. So this is interesting. I was going to pick what Bill showed earlier, The Pimp Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. Notes written for and everything. But you know what? I'm going to mix it up. So he already showed that. I'm going to show off an album that's sort of a concept album, sort of not. But I'm going to pick Black Sabbath in Tear. This is during the Tony Martin era. I actually have the box set. I'll show the box real quick. Yeah. The Anno Domini box set. Great box set. What I love about this record is the fact that it's really Tony Martin coming into his own, writing sort of this Norse mythology sort of concept. And the fact that Cozy Powell's on this album. I mean, Cozy Powell's the drummer of all drummers. And really showcases Tony Martin's vocal ability. And I also want to show this off just over the sheer fact that it's a very underrated period in Sabbath's catalog. And they don't really have any concept record, you could say. So I wanted to go for this one. But Anno Mundi was one of the pre-release songs they put out before this whole box set came out on Spotify. And I put that on, and it almost sounds like Bohemian Rhapsody, the way that starts with the background vocals, very operatic, and then it gets heavy. And follow that with The Lawmaker. It's so fast and aggressive. Hooks you right there. And then you have longer tracks like Jerusalem and the Sabbath Stones. Very heavy, powerful tracks. And I even love the ballad Feels Good to Me. And the way the album ends with Heaven in Black. It's just incredible stuff. There's something about this era of Black Sabbath does not get enough love. Especially even Forbidden, which got remixed. I'd recommend checking that out too. But this album is just incredible from start to finish. So that's me, my last pick. A little bit of a curveball.
All right. Well,
that box set is good.
Well, we've already gone long. Anybody? And thank you, Derek, by the way. Is there any? We could zip through honorable mentions if you want. If Philip says he's got 2,000, that might take a while.
No.
If you could narrow it down to one or two, that'd be all right.
Here. Porcupine Tree, Fear of Blank Planet. It's sort of treatise on postmodern alienation, people just being absorbed by their screens all the time and by over-consumerism. Very dark album, absolutely. Martin Popoff's favorite Porcupine Tree album, I think. He's praised this one a lot. And again, great concept, very dark album, very dark concept. Buying a gun to kill time, for instance, that's one of the lyrics in there. Really good stuff. I'll just say that one.
Excellent. All right, Bill, Dan. Bill, you got something?
Yeah, I'll just do a quickie. I got a ton, but I'll just do, just for fun, these two are connected in a way. Joe Jackson, Heaven and Hell from 1997 and Magenta 7 from 2004. Because they're both concept albums based around the 7 deadly sins, and they both take a very unique spin on that concept. So an odd little pair, but both brilliant.
Awesome. All right,
Dan, you got fast. Streets Part 2, Wasp, The Crimson Idol. I'm not going to talk about that. It's pretty much the same story as that. Can't forget Kiss, Music from the Elder. It's good. I would say great, but it's good.
Great. It's great.
I like it.
It's a Contrarians favorite.
Well, Contrarians, like, look at this last one here. Nostradamus by Judas Priest. I like this album a lot.
I've got that. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Might be a little long, but...
I would it's a song, it's a sketch or intro song. Take off all the intros, you got a great album right there. That's my 2 cents.
I don't have a problem with it.
Neither do I, but I'm just saying.
We should do a deeper dive into that. I don't know if anybody's ever really done that.
I'm in.
Well,
next.
We should do that. We could probably do that next month. It might be a good idea. Let's look. Is a Dark Horse album on Nostradamus? Done. Consider it done, gentlemen. This is how we come up with topics, ladies and gentlemen. Right. They all stem from here. I'm going to tell Marco. See, did he already put up October?
No.
Okay.
September, yeah.
October. Nostradamus Dark Horse album. Oh my God, yes. Brilliant idea. And I don't think we've done that.
No, we've done the Jugulator.
Right. We didn't do Nostradamus. Okay, we're doing it. Oh God, I better write it down. All right. Derek, you got any honorables?
Yeah, so I'll go with the Kendrick Lamar Pick to Pin Butterfly from Bill. Classic, modern sort of hip hop combining jazz with more traditional hip hop with a little bit of more of that trap hip hop on Black of the Berry. Just a great tale of story of racism and living in Compton and just going through everything you have to go through living in a society like that. I love like the For Free interlude. It's funny. That's hilarious. I love Wesley's Theory. You have a song on there with Snoop Dogg, which adds a lot of smooth flavor to it. I love These Walls that has a female vocalist. I can't recall her name right now, but that's a great one. Black of the Berry is just so powerful. And the album ends with an interview that Kendrick does with Tupac. He sort of takes these interview clips and puts them in, and he's asking Tupac questions. And at the very end, he just kind of fades out, and that's how the album ends. So that's just brilliant one that really sticks with me the most. And I had another honorable mention of Halloween, The Keeper of the Seven Keys, Part 1 and 2. I love those albums. Oh, yeah.
And 3.
And 3, yeah. The Legacy.
Yeah.
Just great landmark power metal albums. And I believe, I don't know the whole story of them. I know that they throw the keys in the river at the end, right? As far as I know.
All I know is there's no seventh key being thrown according to the lyrics, which bugs me.
I just listen for the music, honestly. By the time I get to the end, I'm like, whoa, I don't even know what happened. It just so happens in your head so fast you just forget everything. You have to read a synopsis.
You tell me if you see a seventh key in there. I don't.
I will pull out my vinyl here.
All right, cool. All right.
That's all I got.
Perfect. Well, I emailed Marco to make sure it gets on the schedule for October. So, Nostradamus, Dark Horse album. We're due for a Dark Horse album. He did. I can see it now. That'll be fun. All right. There you go, gentlemen. I want to thank you all. Thanks for the ideas. We're not phenomenal. And thank you, Dan, for bringing up the Elder. I was thinking, is anybody going to bring up the Elder?
Oh, Kiss is my go-to band, so
right.
must mention it.
But all good picks, panel. I appreciate it all. I want to welcome Derek to the channel. Nice to see you, Derek. Hopefully you'll be signing up for a lot more discussions. Glad to have you. And of course, Philip, Bill, and then Dan are here. So another great discussion. If you'd like to be on these discussions, you could be on them. We have a Patreon. If you would like to support the channel that way, a lot of good discussions on there. You get to see videos sooner than later. We also have a Ko-fi. Buy us a pint or a cup of coffee. We'd love to have that. We'll just take donations too. We love money. But really, we're here to talk music, and this was yet another. Or, see, you got to keep me on track. Buy yourself a darn shirt. There's a link down below to get you some merch. Get a shirt, for crying out loud. You know, why not? But another great show. So, gentlemen, we'll see you. Everybody, have a good week. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye, guys. Yep.
Bye, guys.
See you later.